Jacob, for this introduction. Yeah, pleasure to be with you all this morning. So the agenda for today is to present a bit why innovation is important to ensure stronger food security in Eastern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, and to talk a bit about the innovation hub that we set up at WFP, as well as the type of innovation that we are looking for and what we provide to support this innovation. So maybe just before jumping into this, a quick introduction on my side. So I'm Jeremy. I joined the WFP family relatively not long ago. So I come from the private sector. I worked a lot in the startup scene, mostly in Berlin, in Germany. And in this call, we also have Magana, who is our expert when it comes to engagement with the private sector. So can you confirm that you can see my screen, Jacob?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm just going to start on the rationale behind innovation and the roles that private sector has to play to allow us to sustainably achieve zero hunger. So when we look at the root causes of hunger in Eastern Africa, we see that there are three mainstream. The first one is food insecurity is driven by conflict and displacement. So you might have heard, for example, of the Tigray crisis right now in northern Ethiopia. A lot of conflict happening there, which pushed a lot of people to flee and to go to neighboring countries. So here, those people are insecure. They don't have their home. They don't have like their small farm and so on. So here, WFP need to provide support. So that's one type of cause that drive hunger. We also see that there are a lot of climate-induced shocks in our region. So this can be droughts and floods. But here again, this has a strong impact on people production, food production, and on people's livelihood. And in terms of people don't have the income and the food for their well-being and to provide for their family. And the last pillar, so to say, is related to fragile food system. So basically, markets are very informal, are very unstable. There is a lot of poverty, and if you have like low income, it's difficult to procure food and to procure nutritious food. And there is a question of food availability, affordability, accessibility, and quality. So when we look at the first pillar around conflict, insecurity, and displacement, WFP tried to solve this through humanitarian assistance, so providing food and cash to people in need. When we look at the two other pillars, we see that it ties strongly to having a resilient and stable food system in the region. So that's why WFP has two agendas. One is to save life, humanitarian assistance, and the other one is to change life, so basically contribute to economic development in the different countries where it's actually needed. So to achieve stronger food system, innovation and development of resilient market are key. So to sustainably achieve zero hunger, we need to ensure stronger agriculture output, and we need to ensure stronger food system. So when we look at a lot of food insecure people in Eastern Africa, a lot of them are smallholder farmers, or a lot of them are working informally in the food system economy. So if we manage to increase the output of the food systems locally, then we'll manage to create higher livelihood, and we'll manage to offer a stronger perspective to those vulnerable people and to leave them out of poverty. So for this, to achieve this, private sector development is key. Invention, new innovation approaches, new business model, and so on are necessary to be able to sustainably develop market and allow people to go away from the need to get food assistance or cash assistance. So that's why in the role of what WFP is trying to achieve, innovation and private sector development and private sector engagement is actually key. So now we could say, why should WFP be involved in innovation? that WFP has comparative advantage that would allow it to have a strong impact. So when we look at WFP comparative advantage, when it comes to innovation, we see that we have like four main pillars. So the first one is the convening power of WFP. So WFP is able to bring a lot of different entities, a lot of different stakeholders around the table, and to get them to look in the same direction. The second thing that WFP can offer is a deep field access. In Eastern Africa alone, WFP has provided assistance to more than 27 million beneficiaries in 2020. They work with a strong network of cooperating partners that have strong boots on the ground in remote and rural areas, which facilitates, which allow WFP to facilitate access. So when we look at innovation, a lot of them would need to be able to access those rural areas, would need to be able to to conduct survey and assessment of the different local ecosystem, to talk to those people in those rural places, so WFP can facilitate this access. The third pillar is that WFP has strong expertise in food system, strong expertise, for example, when it comes to nutrition. What is a good diet? What are the different food items which are available locally or more broadly internationally that could contribute to a good diet for the different geographies where we operate. We have strong expertise in local and international supply chain and so on. And the last pillar, I touched upon it, but WFP has a lot of different partners, ranging from government, ministry, government organization, to private sector, INGOs, and so on. So it's because of those four pillars that we believe that WFP has a strong comparative advantage and has a strong role to play in the development of local market and in the development of market-driven innovation. So WFP's mission when it comes to because of this, WFP decided to launch an innovation hub for Eastern Africa. So the first regional innovation hub to be launched at WFP. And our mission is to nurture and scale sustainable innovation that could allow us to increase food security in our region. And as mentioned earlier, we do that by leveraging WFP's brand, partnership, deep field access, expertise, network of cooperating partner, and so on. So maybe this question comes relatively often: what do we mean with innovation? So when we look at innovation, we assess them according to 5 different aspects. The first one is the quality of the team. Second one is level of impact. Then comes sustainability, so basically around the business model and the financing mechanism. The fourth one is a strategic fit. Can we as WFP actually support and propel this innovation? And the fifth one is scalability. At the end, scalability is the key metric to measure our impact and success. It's good to have pilot to test assumption, be able to get a deeper understanding of the needs of the ecosystem and of the needs of those food insecure population and so on. But innovation is going to be powerful only if it is able to scale. And maybe one last aspect when it comes to this, which I want to stress, is this aspect of sustainability. So we want to, and we invest in what we call transformative innovation that has the potential to be sustainable and long-lasting. So usually innovation starts with a business model which is not really strong. At the beginning, there is going to be a lot of cash burn. But we only will support innovation if they have the potential to be profitable or sustainable at some point and be able to evolve without the support of organizations like WFP. So when we look at this innovation hub that we launch, we have 4 main objectives to achieve this mission that I mentioned earlier. So everything is about this idea of leverage. So our first objective is to increase our leverage to propel innovation. Our second one is to find and select innovation, invention that can allow us to reach strong food security in the region. The third one, once we have found those innovation, is actually to provide them with the support that they need to allow them to scale. And the fourth one is around learning and knowledge sharing on those innovation. So in some cases, there is no need to replicate or to duplicate the hill. There is a lot of learnings out there on innovation that have succeeded or innovation that have failed, but it's very difficult for people to actually access this, and very often they have to start from scratch. So when we look at our role as an innovation, our sweet spot is basically what is called the Death Valley. So this is not really at scale, but when we look at innovation, there are different stages. There is a stage of discovery of a certain problem, of a certain opportunity. There is a stage of invention. So here, those stages are usually supported by public funds. And here, universities, for example, research center, are going to have a key role to play. Then those discovery and invention are going to be turned into innovation. And those innovation are going to be turned into operating and business model and going to be commercialized. And the last stage is actually the scaling stage, where private sector takes over. So what we see in our region in Eastern Africa is that there is a strong part of this journey, which is called the Death Valley, for which it's very difficult as an innovator to access A, funding, and to access B, technical assistance. The geography where we operate, ecosystems are not that developed. So innovators don't have the same support mechanism that we can have in countries like Denmark, in many countries in Europe, Southeast Asia, and even the US. So there is a lot of support to develop invention, to try to understand what are key problem statements and what are the type of invention that could play a strong role in upscaling innovation ecosystem and drive market-driven innovation in our region. But there is a key gap when it comes to innovation being actually implemented and commercialized. So bottom line, that's basically where we focus. But to focus on this Death Valley, we need to work upstream and we need to work downstream. So what we see is that a lot of innovation fail and dies in this Death Valley. Yeah, maybe because they didn't went from, or their value proposition is not what they think they are. They don't get the funding, they don't get the technical assistance. Context locally in Eastern Africa where they operate, it's very fragmented. Level of digitalization is very low and so on. So there are a lot of structural elements that makes it difficult to succeed. So we need a virtuous circle where we are able to inform the discovery and the type of invention needed to try to make the innovation actually more successful and more impactful. So here we need to work with entities like universities and research center. On the downstream part, we also need to work with the private sector entities that provide additional funding. So once we manage to support certain innovation to actually begin commercialization, to prove their concept, to prove a certain operating business model, and to get valuable feedback from their different users, then we need to have strong connection with VCs, venture capitalists, investment funds, and so on, so that they can take over, provide stronger funding, so Series A, Series Bs, or large seed funding to allow those businesses to reach stronger scale with a commercial mindset. So all of this to say that I actually like this saying a lot. It takes a village to raise a child, and it takes an ecosystem to scale an innovation. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we as WFP alone don't hold the key for successful private sector development and stronger food system. We need to work upstream, we need to work downstream, and we need to work with partners that are going to bring additional expertise, additional skill set, additional operational capacity that will allow us to provide to the ecosystem a wide range of services that allows discovery and invention to be turned into innovation, and innovation to be turned into large businesses that will be able to scale across multiple countries. So the hub as such, Ignite, is set up as a consortium of partners. So we have international organization. We partner, for example, with CARE. We have academia. So as of now, we have a partnership with DTU Skylab Food Lab, so in Copenhagen. We have a few donors that so far, since we officially launched the hub end of December last year, provided us with a bit more than 5 million in seed funding. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark and USAID. And we have entrepreneur support organization and corporations that are also joining this hub. What we look at, so this is how we are set up as a consortium of partners, able to bring able to fill the needs and the gap of the different innovations that we want to support. If I summarize it in a very simple way, what we provide to invention, to innovation, and to businesses is equity-free funding and technical assistance. Technical assistance can take a lot of different forms, and that's why we are bringing more partner on board. It can be around investment readiness, it can be around commercialization, it can be around access to smallholder farmers, it can be around access to government and so on. So here we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. We try to understand the needs and then provide the added value services needed. I've been asked this question a couple of times. It's actually very difficult to say what the hub actually does, because as of now, we've been implementing different programs, again, with this idea of we can't just act at one part of the development. As I mentioned before, we need to look at the whole value chain and at the whole ecosystem. So just to give you an example, so we've run over the past year a program which is called NextGen that Magana in this call actually led. So here the idea was that we need to empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. So we work with a lot of different universities here in Eastern Africa to help the students develop concepts and innovation around food system. We had a lot of support packages along the way, and the top team just spent 1 month in Copenhagen to be able to develop prototype and have access to a lot of partners and companies in Copenhagen that could help them in their journey to build the food system of tomorrow in Eastern Africa. We've had traditional we've had a traditional acceleration program where we supported businesses, early stage businesses, to actually grow, and we're about to launch a few innovation acceleration program in a few countries in our region. So just to the last piece is going to be in trying to make this a bit more concrete. So when we look at our area of focus, it's relatively broad. It's around food system, strengthening food system, making them more resilient, and developing more stable markets. So food system is incredibly complex. What you can see on the screen here is an attempt to try to look at food system. It's very difficult to represent this on a PowerPoint because you have so many different ways to look at it. You have so many different dimensions. So I will share this PowerPoint afterwards so you can have a look more in details at this slide. For today, I just try to summarize it in a very simple way. So when we look at food system, we can divide it into 4 different categories. The first one is going to be the production. So it's going to be around agriculture. So one of the questions, like on the side, you can see like a couple of questions. So around production, one of the questions that we ask ourselves is how can we ensure stronger agricultural productivity. How can we ensure stronger resilience to climate shocks like drought and food, which has a strong impact on the level of food production? How can we ensure higher livelihood for smallholder farmers? The second stage is around food transformation and food processing. So here, for example, one question that we are trying to address is how might we reduce post-harvest losses, create added value products, and increase the nutrition quality of the food. The third piece is around distribution. How can we make nutritious food more available, accessible, and affordable? How can we reduce post-harvest losses, which is one of the main challenges here also in our region because of the lack, for example, of a strong transport system, of the lack of infrastructure, of the lack of cold storage solution. And the last one is around consumption. How might we ensure intake of nutritious diet by vulnerable people that have a low income? I could spend 2 hours talking about this. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples around the production. So when we look around production, to have the productivity of 1 acre farm, for example, in smallholder in Eastern Africa is way lower than the type of yield that we can see in economies like in the US or like in Europe. So to increase this yield, we need to find strong innovation that allows smallholder farmers to have access to the input that they need, to have access to mechanization services. Those smallholder farmers, which basically contribute to 80% of the food production here in Eastern Africa, are not financially included. So this makes this very difficult for them, for example, to be able to access loan, to be able to buy input and to find make a financial way to be able to buy the different inputs and products that they need. We might need insurance scheme to protect the smallholder farmer from those climate shock. We are in the need of post-harvest solution to reduce the waste that happen from smallholder farmers up to the consumer. But again, like a key part happen at the smallholder farmer level. We need solution to reduce aflatoxin level, which is again one of the key problem statements that we're trying to address. So aflatoxin is really widespread. It's basically when crops have a level of moisture which is too high. So this is going to create this can create a different type of cancer and bad health consequences for people who are going to eat food with a aflatoxin level which is too high. In Eastern Africa, in a lot of area, climate is very dry. There is not that much rain. So how can we produce food that can grow in those arid to semi-arid context? And maybe just one last one, but again, like the list could be a lot longer than this. How do we ensure strong and proper environmental practices to reduce the impact of global warming and climate change? And maybe just to wrap this up, I'm just going to give you like a couple, maybe 2 innovations that we have in our portfolio, just to make this a bit more concrete to you. And then I would love to open the floor for questions. So one social enterprise that we are supporting is called Tiny Totos. So Tiny Totos is trying to build a network of a French network of community-based daycare in urban informal settlement. So if you are a mother in those informal settlements, it's difficult to find the time to have revenue-generating income activities because you have to take care of your kids. Daycares don't have a profitable business model, so far they've been implemented and managed by NGOs. So those NGOs create small daycare, and the mothers are able to put their kids during the day in those daycare. So Tiny Totos is trying to shift from NGOs and a model which is financed every year by institutional donor to a model where actually everyone will be able to get value, and to a business model which is actually profitable. So they have been working with a lot of women entrepreneurs to develop daycare. So those daycare are able to benefit from Tiny Toto's support. So they are able to go from managing 5 to 10 kids on a daily basis to managing 40 to 50 kids. With this higher number of kids, they are able to make more money. Tiny Totos is providing those daycare with loan to create a small kitchen, to professionalize their practices, is giving them training on early childhood development. Tiny Totos is buying in bulk a lot of food that they sell at a low prices to those daycare. So those daycare are able to sell food to the kids at a low prices and food which is highly nutritious. So basically, mothers are able to put those kids in those daycare at a lower price point than what was before. They can then have time to develop revenue generating activity. Kids have access to quality food, have access to good early childhood education. And those women entrepreneurs are able to make money out of this to start employing a few people and so on. So this is just one example where here it's not an innovation from a tech perspective, but it's an innovation around business model and around operating model. The second example that I want to give is Colorful Giggle. So Colorful Giggle is headquartered in Nigeria, and they developed the first 45 baby cereal in this country. So basically, they realize that when you have a low income, it's very difficult to access baby foods. And a lot of baby foods which are available out there are going to be relatively expensive and are not going to be convenient for mothers to prepare because it requires quite some time to actually prepare it. So they are basically developed this brand of fortified cereal that they are able to sell at 20 USD cents per serving. So a price point which is accessible by a lot of mothers out there. They developed a packaging which is environmental friendly. They have in this packaging like a lot of different cards that kids can play with that allow them like to learn the alphabet or to learn words and so on. So here again, it's a model where the innovation is on the manufacturing process based on a strong understanding of the local needs of vulnerable and food insecure women out there. So I'm just going to stop here.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Very interesting, and personally, I think I got 10 questions I would like to ask you. But I think we should give the open the floor to the audience, and perhaps I could ask you just taking down your presentation so we can do it a bit more virtually face to face. First of all, Asbjørn, could I hand over the mic so to speak to you? You have a question.
Our question is, when WFP helps in the southern region of Africa, do you focus on the local crops that already are present, or do you try to import more productive crops from the Western that's more been modified to grow in these hot areas where they're more resistant to climate shocks and such?
Thank you for that.
I just had a power cut, so I was just offline for 30 seconds, and I just joining on my phone. So Jakob, great if you can repeat the question.
Yes, you are do so. The question is in terms of the crops used, whether you have a focus on using local crops or so, or is also the importing more productive crops that might be more drought resilient or so. So what's the balancing act on that?
Yeah, so here, as very often, it all depends. So we tend to favor local crops because people are used to eat certain crops in the region. But obviously, like for stronger resilience to drought and so on, there is a need for a different type of seeds. And whether this seed is actually produced locally or sourced internationally doesn't really make a difference. And here again, like the level of research in some or like a few countries around the world have a very strong expertise in researching new type of seeds which are more drought resilient. So it's definitely something that we can support.
Okay, thank you for that. And moving on, Christian. Or Christian, he's asking if you could elaborate a bit on how you work with local students in East Africa.
Yeah,
and,
sorry, I
yeah.
didn't realize it was me because my name is Jane.
Okay, Christian, my apologies. Yeah, sorry, I need my glasses on.
No, I was just asking, yeah, if you talked about empowering the generation of young people, of the upcoming entrepreneurs in East Africa. Could you elaborate a bit on how that works, how that unfolds in practice?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Christian. Really good question. So here, basically, we partner with Hult Prize, which is like a global startup competition for students. So you have like a student from all over the world competing for prizes ranging to or like reaching up to 1 million. And basically, what we saw there is that it's always the same usual suspects, so to say, that actually wins those prizes. So in a lot of, if you are a student in a country like the US, you're gonna have access to a lot of expertise, to a lot of funding, to strong innovation lab that enables you to develop any concept that you have. In Eastern Africa, university, it depends, but a lot of university don't have the capacity to support students that wants to be entrepreneurs. So we basically designed this program where we had like more than 450 students participating from all over Eastern Africa, from a lot of different universities. We help them to develop a concept of innovation around food system. We selected a few of them to attend like a 3-week boot camp, where we had a lot of different experts coming in, working with them on business model, on better understanding their value proposition, their operating model, and so on. And we took the top 3 teams to go to Copenhagen for 1 month. And during this 1 month, they were able to access the DTU food lab, where they were able to develop their prototype. They were able to create a lot of meaningful connection with local students, but also with a lot of different organizations that can help them to commercialize their different businesses. So this was the first program of its kind that we actually ran, but that's a bit it in a nutshell.
Very interesting.
Is it clear? Yeah.
I think it clearly opens the opportunities also for linking up East African and Danish, or you could say Nordic students in up to these innovation challenges that you're facing. Following to that, Mette Windqvist from Forest of the World, would you like to pose your question?
Thank you. Yes, very much. I've got 2. One of them is very concrete. I'd like to just very briefly hear your view on agroforestry as a potential solution to a lot of what you're talking about. In our experience, that actually serves a lot of purposes at one and the same time. The other thing is a bit more about how to concretely maybe connect with your innovation hub. Is there any kind of sources of funding that NGOs, how do you see NGOs' role in all of this? Because I really recognize your Death Valley in terms of getting things pushed to a commercialization. We do work with commercial partners in Forests of the World, so we do have that kind of experience, but some of those collaborations need a bit of help, for instance, just to concretize and illustrate. we've been pushing for an idea to make flour, like for baking, etc., of the husks of coffee. So it's basically when you've taken the seed out and you're using it as a coffee bean, you will have some residue, and you can actually, an American company is using that to produce flour, which is supposedly very nutritious. But we need more. Obviously, they don't want to give us the recipe of how they're doing it. So we've kind of approached some Danish universities, etc., and those think it's quite interesting, but they're also quite expensive. So there's several kinds of death valleys that we enter into in terms of looking for funding to take us a step further in some of these processes. So I don't know if you can shed some light on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this question and comment. So definitely agroforestry has a key role to play. It has a key role to play for global warming. It has a key role to play for, let's say, circular ecosystems. It has a key role to play to ensure water retention and so on. So it's definitely one vertical, so to say, that is of interest to us. Here, when we look at agroforestry, I would tend to say that this is a concept or a model which is not widely spread in Eastern Africa. One of the key questions also, as you mentioned, is what would be the model and the value proposition here? And part of it is just focused on a medium to long-term approach. And a lot of stakeholders in those ecosystems are just running from 1 month to another. So it's very difficult to find the right model and mechanism to give them the incentive to invest into, for example, reforestation. That is going to yield a lot of benefits, but it's going to yield a lot of benefits in quite a few years from now. So here again, we recognize that we have a role to play to allow the adoption of such model by providing a bit of capital to support those different initiatives. So we do have funding available to support like basically any innovation project that can help strengthen food system. So I think maybe Jakob will share my contact afterwards, or I will share the presentation. I have my contact details afterwards. Feel free to send us a short description of your project, and we can take it from there.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. And I think on top of that, we're also looking into some of the new funding rounds coming from the European Commission. And as you know, we've been supporting quite more or less now counting 34 partnerships within the last few years. So if there are specific project initiatives, please pass them on, and we'll give it a go as well. So following to that and respecting that time is running fast, E. Andersen, you have a specific questions that's probably turning more into the industry focus.
Yes, because it was mentioned here that you have to take care of availability, sustainability as one of the points that was mentioned in the second PowerPoint. And I'm surprised to see and learn that if you go to the tea industry, it's the biggest export industry in Kenya with 1.3 billion. And the industry is in trouble. They're not selling as much as they used to do. And I've been to 2 tea factories, and it's the same situation. The costs of operating to produce steam, for example, is rising, and it's just a worn-out system. So it's more a point than a question, is that maybe that's an area that you should look into to secure the biggest export industry, that the infrastructure coming to the pumps and pipes, controls, to the boilers, that's where the tea industry has to look into to do maintenance, because I'm sorry to say that China and Eastern Asia, they have invested heavily into to their production, and they are just performing much better price-wise in this area. And it's really an area where I think it has not been taken care of by the tea industry?
Yes,
Yes.
thanks for this question. So, to be fully honest, the tea industry is something that we haven't looked at so far, but we know that in those global economy, it's very difficult to focus on a food system as seen in only one circular economy within one country. So we know that the export value chain have a key role to play to create higher livelihood and development. So when we look at Kenya, for example, there is a tea industry, there is the avocado industry, there is a flower industry. And the point that you're mentioning are actually really good, like how can we provide support, or what can we do to ensure competitiveness with countries like China that have like a lot of investment going into those export value chain. So here I don't have a real answer for you, but it's definitely like a key point and a key question on this idea of local competitiveness, of stronger manufacturing processes, value add, and so on. Because also what we see is that a lot of raw material actually, most of the export value chain are based around raw material, and the value addition happen actually afterwards outside of the country. So this is like a lost opportunity, so to say, for local economy to develop more industries around this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Time is running fast, as always, when you're in good company and with interesting discussions here. Perhaps one final question would be, I sense there's quite some interest in reaching out to WFP, but is it simply just writing a mail to you, or do you have a structured process on how you interact and formulate your concepts and ideas?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So we are still relatively new. Yeah, we have been around officially for 9 months. So we are still in the process of defining a bit, what are the different engagement stream. So far, what we've done is to have specific challenges in specific country, usually quite broad around food system, and this is like one of the main entry door. So here you have the opportunity to apply with a pitch deck and with different documents. We have a bunch of experts which are reviewing those applications, and then we take a certain number that are joining our program, and then it's funding and technical assistance. Generally speaking, we are never against a direct outreach. Because we also have a lot of needs that come from our country offices that have boots on the ground, and in some cases their program touch upon agroforestry, increase of farmer yield, and so on. So those type of solutions can enhance the program, or there can be strong synergies. So we are also open to take innovation outside of those innovation challenge. But I would tend to say that innovation challenge is probably like the easiest and fastest way to get in.
Okay. Jeremy, again, very interesting, and for sure here from Access to Innovation side of it, we'll continue the conversations in the coming weeks, and also see some opportunities for linking also the broader innovation community, both civil society, private sector, and academia here from Denmark, increasingly to the very well thought through and interesting platform that you have developed in East Africa. So Jeremy Pearce, thank you so much for taking your time. It has been really interesting. And even though we're sitting behind screens, should we give it a go with virtual applause? That would be it. And then thank you, Jeremy. And to the audience, I hope to see you soon again at our next coming HY talk. We are going to focus on some of the new trends going on within impact financing, and then heading on with a focus on that's in November, and more focus on the agribusiness opportunities following in December. And for those of you that are now eager going out to explore the opportunities, especially in East Africa, we are hosting a delegation trip in November 22nd till 27th, with a focus in Tanzania and Uganda. I'll forward a bit information following to our call here today. And then, not the least, on the 14th in Copenhagen, we're having a focus on the nitty-gritty balls on how to set up your business in an East African context. So for those of you who have an interest in joining in, feel free to sign up. And again, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. And to the audience, thank you so much for the time. It's been a pleasure as always. And we more or less managed to stick within the time frame. So thank you so much for now.